welcome back to our channel. My name is Sage. Thank you so much for joining us here today on our newest video. Happy New Year. And if you are a first-time visitor, welcome. My name is Sage, and here in our little corner of the interweb, we talk about everything homestead, sustainability, off-grid, and really just a faith walk as we journey to building our off-grid homestead in the state of Texas. But juggling so while we still live here in Las Vegas because we're not fully moved out there yet. But it's gonna be an adventure. It's been a great one so far. And so in today's video, what I wanna share with you is the wonderful world of composting. And composting is something I think often not everyone thinks that they can do because, oh, you know, I live in an apartment, I don't have a house or a garden or a backyard, or, you know, why would I want to compost? I mean, what's it useful for? I'm just going to throw away my kitchen scraps. And I think that it's something that can be intimidating, right? Because a lot of the times you're taking what is perceived as waste and giving it a second life, whether it's to your house plants, to your garden, to maybe fruit trees, or even just landscaping outside of your building if you live in an apartment, you know, or you have your house plants. Everybody can get to, everyone can start composting. And it's definitely something that has taken me a handful of years to really get down. And I really just hope today that in today's video, it can give you a great foundation, a one-stop shop to start your composting journey and hopefully help you to feel a lot more confident in getting that started and knowing that, you know what, learning something like that could definitely bring some great value to my life. And so let's dive into it and let's learn today all the things about compost. Let's talk about what is compost. So according to Merriam-Webster's definition of compost, it is a mixture that consists largely of decayed organic matter and is used for fertilizing and conditioning land. And of course, as a verb, you know, compost means to convert materials such as plant debris to compost. So what is compost really used for? I know I just shared a little bit of that with you all in the beginning here of when I was chatting, but compost is mostly used for fruiting trees, for gardens, for lawns and agricultural lands to improve both soil quality, fertility, and promote healthy plant growth, reducing any need for fertilizers. And so isn't that cool that you can essentially make your own fertilizer for the things that you need, either, like I said, in your own gardens, on your land, or even in your house plants? It's amazing. We can do that. We have the power to do that, the God-given power to do that. And I think that is pretty cool that you get to have a way for your food and landscape waste to essentially have a second life after its primary purpose. So how do you even make compost? Let's talk about that because there is what's called a golden ratio to composting. So the golden ratio of compost, that is something that it takes time. It probably won't be something that you master right away, but it is what we like to say is the perfect ratio to have that microbial activity and really just the processing of your compost in a timely manner happen at its most optimal capacity. And so the golden ratio meaning 1 part greens to 2 part ground. Now, what does that even mean? Now, with the science of compost, it's a fantastic science because in order to have that microbial process happen and these, you know, various items in your compost start processing and disintegrating essentially into reusable nutrients and giving them a second life, it takes a very specific ratio, and that is what has definitely worked in my experience. Did not master it in the beginning. Took actually a few months of trial and error, but 1 part green and 2 part ground is a golden ratio. Now, what does that mean, 1 part green? Greens meaning nitrogen-rich items that you put in your compost, which usually consists of kitchen scraps, grass clippings, if those grass clippings don't have any type of Monsanto or insect insecticide or anything like that. As long as you don't have that in your grass clippings or weed killer, you're good. Put that in your compost, right? But that, and also garden and house plants, as long as those garden plants that you're putting in your compost doesn't also have any type of insecticides or pesticides, coffee grounds, fresh leaves, manure from herbivores, meaning your chickens or cows if you have that, tea bags without the staples, and making sure those tea bags, of course, aren't made from any type of plastics. There's not a lot of them out there anymore, but you always want to make sure. And then crushed eggshells. Now, I would say for crushed eggshells, use that sparingly because there is an amount of calcium that gets input into your compost. And if you already naturally have a soil where you live at that is already very high in calcium, I would say just go light on these, if not doing it at all. So as far as your 2-part browns, now this is going to be twice the amount of what your greens are, but those are carbon rich items that'll be going into your compost, meaning everything from dead leaves to straw and hay to sawdust from wood items that aren't treated. So if they're treated with anything, I would not suggest sawdust going into your compost. Twigs, brown paper products, meaning like your brown paper shopping bags, maybe shipping materials that you got that had brown packing paper in it, cardboard, your black and white shredded newspaper. Do not do color because those are typically chemical colorings, corn stalks, paper towels and napkins, if those don't have grease on them. And so those are really the golden ratio of what you want and the different types of items you can put in there. Now, for items that you don't want to put in, that is something that we will show you here in the next whiteboard presentation. I feel like a teacher. Okay, so we know what to put in the compost. But what should we not put in our compost? So the big no's in compost are meat, fat, and bones, dairy products, because these attract rodents and pests and whatnot. And of course, very obviously, trash and plastic. Don't put those in our compost, right? Wood ashes, because often wood ashes, it is hard to determine whether or not that's coming from treated wood. Let's see if you have a fire pit. Now, if you have, let's say, wood that you've cut down on your own land and you know it's not treated, then I'm sure it's fine. But overall, no wood ashes. Invasive plants or weeds. Diseased plants, I think that one's pretty obvious to not put diseased plants in there. Also pet waste, right? So not our dog and cat's poop. Not putting that in our compost. It's not the same as the waste of herbivores, which is obviously cows, chickens, and whatnot, because the likelihood of them carrying some type of disease or pathogen is extremely high. And so not that. And then lastly, glossy or colored paper or magazines, those unfortunately cannot go in your compost. Like I said, because a lot of the ink that is on that paper and the gloss all comes from chemicals, unfortunately. And so those are the big no's in compost. Now you might be thinking, okay, all right, I know what the golden ratio is to compost, what I should put in of my 1-part greens to 2-part grounds. I know what the big no's of compost are. Now, what about a compost bin? What do I use as a compost bin? And so in some footage that I will share with you here, you'll see what my DIY bin was. And so with my DIY bin I had in the very beginning, we started it about 4 years ago during the pandemic, and I just replaced it, was essentially a giant storage bin that I drilled holes on all 4 sides, and then also at the bottom for drainage. And then I literally got my compost journey started in that way. No, it's not ideal. Absolutely not. But I had to work within a budget. And so that is an option. I've seen that some people will usually build, some type of wooden structure to hold the composting, especially if they have a lot of landscape trimmings and whatnot. They need to get into a huge area. They'll usually build that. And I've seen people build it out of pallets, and then obviously have that jimmy rigged, I guess you could say. And then there's also a tumbling composter. Now I will call this probably the bougier composter because the fact that it is specifically engineered to compost faster than a regular, DIY bin or, DIY wooden composter. The tumbling composter actually works really great, and I would love to share that with you all and just kind of what that looks like, because I actually did just get one in and I'm so grateful. And if this tumbling composter looks like something that you want to use as well, link for that will be in the bottom here of this video. So let's check out the tumbling composter, which I'm very excited about. Gigi, you gonna help me? You gonna help me? Are you my emotional support dog? Okay, so you'll see a bit what we're working on today with the composter. So this was my old DIY one from like 3 years ago. It's so bad. The sun obviously damaged so much of it. It's very pitiful. I won't even show you guys anymore. But then this is our new composter. So it's actually a rolling one. So you can have obviously fresh on this side, and then have another batch also on this side. And there's breathable pockets in there, which is really cool, so that you can have that cooking on one side while another side's ready. You can close and open the vents from this end, so you don't have to stick your hands in there. And yeah, you can just turn it. So it's super easy. This is kind of just where it is right now, since I need to transfer the current compost into one side so that that can be cooking, and then we're going to get some worms from our plants and get worms in there too. Okay, so I checked our compost this morning, and when you do check it, obviously, if it starts warming up, you'll feel it. If it's working out well, it's hot, it's a good time to introduce your worms. And so if you take a look at our worms, oh, this one's very angry. Look at it, just thrashing around. So these are actually from our house plants, and the only time that I'll throw in our worms is when the compost is warm, because they need, these particular ones are red wriggler worms, need a warmer environment, and so we're gonna throw them in. And they actually help to break down your compost a lot quicker, because all of this is food for them, which is great. So they're actually very happy in there. They will be, at least. They might be shocked right now. But yeah, they'll break down your compost a lot faster than just the usual processes it usually goes through here. So I'm actually gonna take you real quick to see the compost. It's been, let's say, about a week since it's been transferred over. And then I also threw in our red wiggler worms. And so let's see how it's been processing with them in there. I'm actually really curious. So everything in here, like I said, should be as damp as a sponge, but nothing damper than that, because then that just means, hey, there's way too much nitrogen. But overall, this looks really good. Sorry, it keeps focusing in the wrong area. So you see how it's starting to already turn into soil? Now, this might be a little too moist, but as of right now, I mean, it looks overall pretty good. So I'll give it a few turns, but it actually looks pretty good. And so as far as troubleshooting, let's sit down and talk about that, because I have definitely had compost piles that it's just the journey you go through. You know, you just learn. It's like, okay, well, the compost needs to be heating up whenever you combine your 1 part green to 2 part browns. That should happen within like 2 or 3 days. And mix it in, you know, check it again in another 2-3 days. And sometimes that doesn't happen right away. And so what normally happens with that type of troubleshooting is that if it's too wet, kind of like in the case that we saw with ours, I just need to add more browns. If it's too dry, you don't actually add more greens, just add water. And if the ratio is good between those two, and yet you have some interesting, I guess, smells. Like the one that I know I have battled with before is the smell of ammonia. And that one's interesting because it will literally smell very intensely when you open up your bin. And that's usually because there's too much nitrogen. There's too much nitrogen processing, so too many greens, and you just need to add browns, right? Now, if it smells putrid, now this is beyond ammonia smell, is if it smells putrid and it's too wet, it's just not getting enough oxygen. And in that case, just add browns, turn it, open up, oxygenate the whole pile, and then come back in 2 or 3 days again. See how it does. Oh, and then other than that, if you have like little flies and insects that are attracting to the compost, kind of like how you saw little fruit flies that were coming into mine, you can actually cover all the greens and whatnot with brown material, or even finished compost if you have a stationary bin. Now in my case, because it's a tumbling composter, what I'm going to do is just add browns, turn it again, and then let it sit for 2 or 3 days to get those little fruit flies to go away. And so that's troubleshooting in compost. So there you have it, friends. Composting 101 with Sage. All jokes aside, I really do hope that video was helpful for you and just guiding you on your composting journey. And like I said, you don't have to live on a farm, or in a house with a big backyard garden. You can absolutely start composting from the comfort of your own home and be able to, just like I said, create fertilizer for your house plants, or even for your landscaping where you live at. It's such a beautiful thing to be able to take something that you thought only had its primary purpose and give it a second life. And so with that said, thank you all so much for being here. So appreciate your time. And if this video is helpful for you, we would greatly appreciate it if you just like, share, or even comment below, so that we can get bumped up in the algorithm with the things that we share, and hope to continue sharing in the future. And so wishing you all the very best. Hope that you all and your families are doing well. God bless, and we will talk again soon. Bye. Thank you again so much for joining us today here on our channel. We do not take that for granted. We are ever so grateful. If this video inspired you today with either lifestyle, sustainable, or off-grid living, please feel free to subscribe here on our channel, share with a friend, or like at the bottom. So thank you for stopping by, and hope you all have an amazing start to the new year.